When you download the iHeartRadio app and put the WD and Shook Show on your list of stations, you will prove to the world that you're a little bit smarter than everyone else. The WD and Shook Show, your connection to the signs of the times.
Now, you have a source for the truth in the news. W. Dean Shook, End Time News. Your connection to the signs of the times.
Welcome to End Time News. This is a very special update. I want you to listen to every word of this. This is vital to our country and to our well-being as Americans. Why does the White House want amnesty? And what can we as Americans and as Christians do about this? Well, according to statistics provided by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, President Obama has now significantly decreased the number of illegal immigrants aged under 18 deported or turned away at the border. That stat has decreased some 79.5% under President Obama, from 8,143 the last year of President Bush's administration to 1,669 last year. Meanwhile, the Bush administration deported some 600 minors on average each year. Obama deported 95 last year. Those stats demonstrate that George W. Bush was dramatically lax on immigration. But they also demonstrate that President Obama is even more lax, and that laxity, or laxative, has resulted in tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors pouring across American southern borders. Now, meanwhile, the Democrats continue to promote higher spending, placing more and more Americans on the public rolls. In 2013, a record 1 of 5 American households used food stamps. A record number of Americans were dependent on the federal government with regard to their higher education debt. Overall, a full 49% of Americans receive some form of federal benefits. Adding millions of illegal immigrants to the public rolls, which will happen in terms of lower education and health care by necessity, will skyrocket spending, which is the plan. Many on the right believe that Democrats are pursuing this so-called Cloward-Piven strategy that we talked about last week. This is where psychologist Richard Clower and Francis Fox Piven reasoned that by overloading welfare rolls, the Democratic Party would be forced to take very heavy federal welfare action to save the state and local governments. But this strategy isn't what the Democrats are up to. Cloward-Piven's goal was to create impetus for government to guarantee a universal living. The modern Democratic Party is significantly less interested in guaranteed benefits than for an economic leveling. The motivating factor of the left is not caring for the poor, but tearing down the wealthy. The psychology of the Democratic Party was embodied by Barack Obama's response to a moderator's question in 2008. He said, "I would look at raising the capital gains tax for purposes of fairness." Fairness, not prosperity, fairness. So the Democrats will move to bankrupt the system. No welfare state can survive with open borders. This is a truism. Yet that's exactly what Democrats are now promoting. Open borders with full welfare state. Well, why? Not because Democrats believe that the homegrown poor in America will be better off with more people joining them on the dole, because they won't. Rather, Democrats love the size and scope of the state and despise the rival the state faces in individual success. A growing welfare base requires higher taxation and a degeneration of individual success. This is the goal. This is the goal of the left's hero of the moment, Thomas Piketty, who seeks a global tax on wealth in order to heal the inequality, not to bring prosperity. It is the goal of Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat from Massachusetts, who suggests that all wealth is communal and not individual. There's nobody in this country who got rich on his own. Nobody. You built a factory out there? Well, good for you. But I want to be clear. You moved your goods to market on the roads that the rest of us paid for. You hired workers the rest of us paid to educate. You were safe in your factory because of police forces and fire forces that the rest of us paid for. You didn't have to worry about marauding bands would come and seize everything in your factory and hire someone to protect against this because of the work the rest of us did. Obviously, none of this does anything worthwhile for immigrants who come here to seek prosperity rather than fairness. But the rise in illegal immigration certainly creates an impetus for higher taxes, more economic leveling, and a decline in prosperity for purposes of quote-unquote fairness. The Obama administration isn't merely taking advantage of a good crisis, they're creating one in order to do so. Listen to this clip from Robert Welch from the John Birch Society from 1958. He explains this plan goes way back.
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Now, here are the aims for the United States. 1, greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible. 2, higher and then much higher taxes. 3, an increasingly unbalanced budget despite the higher taxes. 4, wild inflation of our currency. 5, government controls of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation. 6, greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. This is to be accompanied naturally and automatically by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government. 7, far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at work to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states. 8, the steady advance of federal aid to and control over our educational system, leading to complete federalization of our public education. 9, a constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare, the beauties and the absolute necessity of peace, peace always on communist terms, of course. And 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself.
So after hearing that, let me ask you a question. Who are these small groups of people who are very successful at having the 10 Commandments removed from public places? How about the abortion advocates who insist that killing your children in the womb is a woman's right? How about this homosexual crowd? All of these small groups that are fundamentally changing America, these are people who believe in their cause. They're taking action. They're moving on every front, and they won't stop until they achieve their goal, plain and simple. Yet, the rest of us who claim to be Christian and believe in the Word of God, we shake our heads and we go, And we say things like, well, we'll pray about it. Then we say things like, well, we'll just leave it in God's hands. Well, folks, we who are real Christians are God's hands. We're commanded to be His light in the world and to do His work, but we do nothing. Is it because most Christians carry that bag that says Christian on it, and because of that they claim to be Christian, but when you open the bag it's empty? There's nothing in it. There's no light of Christ. There's no transformation. There's no real faith. It's an empty bag. Look, let me share a couple of headlines that illustrate what happens when we, the people, stand up. Now, here's a story from a couple days ago. From Breitbart News, feds to bring in riot squads against illegal immigration protesters. Houston, Texas. Immigrants continue to spill across the U.S. border. Federal authorities are attempting to relocate the migrants from South Texas to housing facilities in states across the nation. One such facility is located in Murrieta, California, where a large group of protesters recently blocked a full bus of immigrants from arriving. The protesters remained there, adamant that illegal immigrants don't get dumped in their town. But soon, the concerned citizens may be forced to step down. Breitbart, Texas has learned the federal agents plan to arrive in Murrieta on Monday with riot gear to ensure that another busload makes it to this housing facility. Well, here's a related story about that first protest, also from Breitbart. Pro-Amnesty crowds burn American flags at Murrieta on the 4th of July. An American flag has reportedly been burned by pro-Amnesty protesters near the Murrieta Border Patrol Station on America's Independence Day. There's a photo which shows a burnt flag on the ground from an anti-illegal immigrant activist who is monitoring the pro-Amnesty demonstration. Now listen to this carefully. Opponents of illegal immigration had gathered in Murrieta to stop Friday's planned transfer of Central American illegal aliens, as they did earlier this week. So this was the second time they stopped it. A pro-amnesty counter-demonstration was organized in response. In addition, Breitbart News obtained photographs of torn-up flags that pro-amnesty demonstrators had impaled on a fence. Bonnie Lewis, an anti-illegal immigration activist, told Breitbart News that she saw one of the pro-amnesty activists dragging an American flag on the ground. And she said, "Hey, don't do that." This activist said, "That's where it belongs." Another illegal immigration activist said that pro-amnesty demonstrators called her an effing whore in Spanish and shouted, "F America." Apparently, they've never heard of the old saying that you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. So in this previous story, they said that on Monday, today, that they were going to send in these ICE riot police. So here's what happened today. Buses with illegals diverted from Murrieta protesters stand ground against 140 aliens aboard. This was published 4 hours ago. Murrieta, California. Demonstrators opposed to illegal immigration stood their ground again at the Murrieta Border Patrol Station on Monday, where U.S. Border Patrol had been scheduled to transfer a third round of buses with approximately 140 illegal aliens aboard in total, transferred from overcrowded Texas detention facilities for a third time. Now let me say this again. For a third time. The buses were rerouted to San Ysidro, California Border Patrol Station near the U.S.-Mexican border for processing. The demonstrators gathered in areas to the north and south of the Murrieta station after law enforcement blocked off the road near the station itself. Many told Breitbart News they considered their stand a success, since buses scheduled for Murrieta are avoiding it as long as the demonstrators remain. Let me say this again. It is a success since buses scheduled for Murrieta are avoiding it as long as demonstrators remain. They're standing their ground. The anti-illegal immigration protesters Monday brought out new first-time demonstrators and onlookers from many different backgrounds, from young enlisted Marines to legal immigrants from Germany, Mexico, Central America. Karen Sigmund of Rage Against the Media, comedian and author Evan Sayet, radio host Kender McGowan also made it as well. Yet, despite all of this, Obama at a naturalization ceremony said this, and I quote, "I'll do everything I can to get an amnesty bill." Here's how this story reads. At a naturalization ceremony on the 4th of July, President Barack Obama vowed to do everything I can to pass amnesty legislation that would give a pathway to citizens to all of the country's illegal immigrants. At a ceremony that naturalized 25 service members and their spouses at the White House, Obama vowed to fix our immigration system, which is broken, and pass comprehensive immigration reform. Let me say that again. Fix our immigration system, which is broken. He always has to put that in there. And pass common sense immigration reform. The only thing here that's broken is the enforcement of our current laws that have worked for the last 200 years. That's the only thing that's broken. He went on to say he would keep doing everything I can to keep making our immigration system smarter and more effective. That would include executive actions. Now listen to what he went on to say. After House Speaker John Boehner told Obama there would not be a vote on an immigration bill in the House this year, Obama said he would enact as many executive actions as he could to change the country's immigration laws and ease deportation unilaterally. Now, President Obama admits what he's going to do right here, something the executive branch has no power to do, and that's to change the country's immigration laws and ease deportation through executive orders. On Thursday, Obama visited the D.C. tech startup 1976 to push for amnesty legislation. The White House said Obama would not visit the border next week in Texas to see the illegal immigrant children who are flooding across. Instead, Obama will attend 3 fundraisers for Democrats during his trip to Texas. Look, let me say this. End Time News has listeners from coast to coast in America, throughout the UK and Western Europe, Australia, throughout South America. This is not a U.S. awakening, but a global awakening for everybody to stand up for what's right, because we are all about to lose it. This may be our last chance. Let me say thank you to Breitbart News and WND for portions of this content. I am your host, W. Dean Shook. You can email me at contact@wdeanshook.com. You can come to the webpage and get these stories and more at wdeanshook.com. You can join me on Twitter at WDeanShook, Facebook at WDeanShook. I'll see you on our next program. If they allow me to stay on the air, I'll see you then. Thank you.
You can get these full stories and more at WDeanShook.com. That's WDeanShook.com.